The story we're going to tell you is still being written, day after day, season after season, generation after generation. It started a long time ago, far away from the farms where the Aga Khan family thoroughbreds are raised today.
I inherited some race horses from my father in India when I was a boy, and except for some 15 years in the middle of my life, I have been on a large scale an owner of race horses, either in the east or in the west.
We still have a whole lot of Mumbai Gold Cups for this race and for that race. And it was only when my grandfather moved to Europe that he became involved in breeding and racing in England and then in Ireland, in France, etc. So it's an activity that's been in the family for a long, long time. And I think there's a great depth of experience.
In the world of thoroughbreds, experience rhymes with patience. Continuity comes with constant renewal. When the last leaves fall from the trees and winter sets in, it's time to look forward to the next generation, without ever losing sight of how and when the story started.
From deciding X will go to Y, there's a lot of hurdles to jump before you go to the race to see that horse.
We breed, we race, we go back to stud, and we breed. We're a circular operation.
It is a long process, but it's one I think you accept. It's something that you do in stages, and we're doing it a long time now, and so the next stage is already established. In the winter, we get to just pause a little bit. Once we've organised where we want our pregnant mares, which farm they'll be on according to their due dates, we should be coming to the end of our yearling breaking. There's not long before 1st of January comes, and we were on night watch then again, and we've another season kicking off.
As an animal goes, I would gladly share a box with a horse anytime. I love them as animals, and we've had some very, very lovely horses, very kind horses. Even some of the most competitive horses that we've had in our yard were lovely, and then there have been some crazy ones that there always are. They're individuals.
Horses have been part of the family life and experience.
Prince Amin and his elder brother, His Highness the Aga Khan, spent part of their childhood in Kenya, occasionally on horseback.
And we used to ride in the forests in Kenya, and it was the most beautiful thing one could have imagined, with amazing butterflies that flew around and amazing birds in the trees and what have you. And I enjoyed every second of it.
Two brothers, two different experiences. With his usual humor, the Aga Khan shares different memories.
Falling off. I have several memories of that exercise, which was not particularly welcome. But I never really rode a lot because I did a lot of competitive skiing and I had knee accidents. So riding was uncomfortable for me.
My mother put me on a horse when I was about 5, and I've been riding ever since, and I love it.
Prince Ali Khan, galloping freely, following an ancestral tradition. The first Aga Khan started racing soon after settling in Bombay in 1848, having left Persia and ridden across Central Asia. His stable of Arabian horses, one of the most prominent at the time, was passed on to his son, Aga Khan II, in 1881, and to his grandson only 4 years later. Prince Sultan Mohammed Shah was only 7 years old when he found himself at the head of a religious community looking to him for guidance. The family horses represented a minute part of the responsibilities the Aga Khan III inherited. He would not only maintain the racing stock, but expand it. If the Aga Khan III waited until 1922 to see his first thoroughbred set foot on an English track, the seed was sown decades before, and Colonel William Hall Walker was no stranger to the process.
His advice was, you need something to take your mind off the very, very busy world you live in, and you should get some thoroughbred horses. And if you want to breed, there's nowhere better than Ireland.
The land now home to the Irish National Stud was once part of Colonel Hall Walker's Tully Stud.
The Aga Khan visited Ireland and was shown around by William Hall Walker, and I suppose convinced at that stage that Ireland was a very good place to rear stock, because William at the time was having great success from the farm that he had purchased here a few years earlier.
The Aga Khan III found Walker, quote, immensely knowledgeable about everything to do with horses, independent in his judgment, outspoken and didactic, while others couldn't look past his eccentricities. Whimsical Walker, as he was known, bred by the stars, and trusted horoscopes to decide with which horses he should part.
We start the season, we'll always have mares due in early January. We take them as they come, and it's a really enjoyable part of the job that has a fair degree of stress with it as well.
C'est assez difficile pour un homme de dire ça, mais le poulinage est un long processus de relaxation qui permet aux choses de bien se passer. Et magiquement assez en réalité à ça. Et il faut vraiment s'y tenir si on veut que ça se passe bien. Et une relaxation même dans l'approche, c'est-à-dire pas uniquement au moment du poulinage. Il n'y a pas d'affolement à avoir, il faut savoir simplement prendre son temps et travailler avec la jument. Et donc là, on a la chance d'avoir des veilleurs de nuit qui ont une grande expérience, sont là depuis plus de 20 ans, à faire la même chose tous les ans, et donc ils connaissent bien les familles, connaissent bien les chevaux. Et dans l'ensemble, ça se passe généralement bien.
Probably the most important thing is that we have good people to look after them, which we do. We're very fortunate, and people that I absolutely trust in my absence, that they will do all they can. Mind you, when you get a call at 3:30 in the morning, you know nobody's calling you to tell you everything is fine.
On a la bonne fortune de travailler dans cette maison qui se donne les moyens de faire les choses comme il faut. Alors il peut y avoir des accidents, mais je pense qu'on en limite quand même quelques-uns en se donnant les moyens de faire les choses correctement.
Retired trainer Jim Kavanagh has collected racing memorabilia for decades and created the Racing Legends Museum in Kildare.
I've been reading up lately on the history. There's so much history attached to the Aga Khan family, both in France and Ireland. And there's an awful lot to take in, because you're talking about traditions, you're talking about decades of good horses. I can pick up some of the books I have here and I can point out to you the great mares that were the foundation mares that still stand out. There's that consistency of high quality since he first bought a horse.
The year is 1922. The stage, Royal Ascot. A 2-year-old filly named Cos easily captures the Queen Mary Stakes. A dream start for the new green and chocolate colors, which immediately find their way to the very select winner's enclosure at the royal meeting. Cos had been acquired 8 months earlier for 5,000 guineas at the Doncaster sales. The daughter of Flying Orb was one of 8 yearlings picked for the Aga Khan by George Lempton. Lempton knew, however, he would not be able to train the yearlings. His yard was packed with strengths for well-established owners like Lord Derby. Among the purchases made in 1921 was a chestnut filly, the Aga Khan III, named Teresina, after his beloved wife Teresa, mother of Prince Ali Khan. Teresina, placed in the Oaks, produced 14 foals, 11 runners, and 10 winners, including the 1930 Irish Oaks winner. The Aga Khan III would eventually collect 13 leading owner titles in Great Britain. And at the end of his extraordinary inaugural season, the newcomer already ranked in 9th place with 13 victories. One yearling bought that milestone year was an eye-catching grey filly. She came from the same farm as Teresina and would also receive a special name, Mumtaz Mahal. Jewel of the Palace was the nickname given by Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan to the love of his life. It was for her that the grieving husband later built the world's most iconic mausoleum. The equine Mumtaz Mahal still features proudly on the walls of farm offices both in Ireland and in France, 100 years after she first joined the family. When does a thoroughbred become a legend? A work of art. Mumtaz Mahal was photographed, painted, sculpted, and earned a place of choice in the collections of the National Horse Racing Museum in Newmarket. In the sales ring as a yearling, she had fetched a head-turning 9,100 guineas, but that was only the beginning for the daughter of the Tetrarch. The Grey Stallion obviously transmitted more than his distinctive coat. His daughter, soon dubbed the Flying Filly, also inherited his dazzling speed and his precocity. At 2, she won her first 5 starts, placing second in the last on heavy ground. At 3, she was second in the 1,000 guineas, missed the board in the Coronation Stakes before returning to the sprint where no one could come close. The press called her Mumti, and fans could follow her triumphs through newsreels at the theatre. Mumtaz Mahal retired the winner of 7 races over 5 and 6 furlongs, having captured the public's imagination. But that's only one chapter of the story. Through the 8,000 items in the National Horse Racing Museum, one can feel the impact the Aga Khan horses have had on the sport.
We're really blessed. We have archive collections, so we have photographs, newspaper clippings, some letters. We have some racing plates. I think some of my favourite things are the Derby scarves, because right in the centre you'll have the horse that won the Derby that day, but all around are the names of all the horses that came before, and they're beautiful silk scarves as well.
Another curator's choice is the Ali Khan Memorial Trophy, awarded in 1961.
The horse that won was High Hat, owned by Winston Churchill. So there's another enormous character in history. But also Ali Khan's horse, Petit Etoile, came second. So there's so many amazing stories that just connect to this one object.
Grey, like her ancestors. Petite Etoile, a great-great-granddaughter of Mumtaz Mahal, impressed several generations.
Saw a race on the old black and white television when we got a TV first, you know. I saw her race. I remember getting beaten one day at Ascot. I think I didn't see her Oaks win. I don't think we had it on television at that time. She had a nice name and she was a great filly.
An incredible filly who raced through an eventful era. Petite Étoile was bred by a father and son team. United by a common interest, they each approached differently.
Grandpa was very interested in pedigrees and in what the pedigrees could do to develop exceptional racehorses. So he was a real pedigree man. And he knew the pedigrees, he studied them, he had a book by the side of his bed that he would look at. Daddy was not a pedigree man at all. He was a field man who was interested in how you took a yearling and developed a yearling to become a 2-year-old, how you developed the racing career for the 2-year-old to optimize its performance, etc. So there were two totally different approaches. My father rode out in races.
An all-round horseman, Prince Ali Khan also raced in his own colors, daring to send a maiden avenger to successfully conquer the Grand Prix de Paris. After his father's passing in 1957, Prince Ali Khan carried on with the racing and breeding operation, while his eldest son, Prince Karim Aga Khan, became the new Imam of the Ismaili community, an enormous responsibility for a young man in his 20s. 1959 would prove a whirlwind of a year with Guinness winners in England, France, and Ireland. Petite Étoile captured 2 classics on her way to becoming the champion horse of 1959. Saint-Crépin scored in the Eclipse Stakes and the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe. The following May, Prince Ali Khan died in a car accident, leaving a terrible void. His charisma would forever be remembered in the world of racing and beyond.
I didn't expect to be an owner. And what happened was the horses went from my grandfather to my father. My father actually died 3 years after he became the owner. So the whole operation was an accident in my life.
My brother and I discussed it absolutely immediately, of course. I was still a student in America, and I did not see myself as a 20-something in America running a stud farm across the Atlantic.
I was a student at the time. I knew nothing whatsoever about horses or about races or race programs or training techniques or breeding policies.
We also had sold a certain number of horses to pay death duties before, on 2 occasions, my grandfather's and my father's, and subdividing what was left would not necessarily have been a very good idea either, because we could both have been left with uneconomic operations. My brother said, well, I'll think about it, let me think about it. And then he called me back the very next day and said, well, I've decided to keep the horses because it's been a family tradition now for quite a while. And so he kept them.
So when I came on board, I was the kid in the school. And I was humble, I listened, I didn't always understand.
In June 1960, the Aga Khan was at Longchamp for the Grand Prix de Paris, the objective set earlier in the season for Charlottesville. The family's colors shined on that day, and the young owner was congratulated by French President Charles de Gaulle. That same month at Epsom, Petite Étoile won the first of 2 Coronation Cups.
It's just a legacy there from one Aga Khan, the Prince Ali, to the present Aga Khan, that stood the test of time.
What I love about the operation is that there are still top-class racehorses that are stemming from some of the original yearlings that were purchased 100 years ago. The story that really encapsulates that for me is the story of Zarkava. Her 10th dam is Mumtaz Mahal. 4 dams later, that family produced Petite Étoile. Then she herself was a very shy breeder. She only produced 3 live foals. The first 2 were colts, and her very last foal in 1974 was a filly. And because she was so precious, He named her Zara after his only daughter.
Yes, it did indeed. Well, it was a unique occasion. She only bore one filly during her whole stud career. So that was very important. Yeah, I like to mark occasions. It's a nice thing to do.
You have no idea how many people ask me whether I'm named after the horse or the other way around. I'm not sure, but I think I was born first.
Yes, you were.
Allez, une dernière. Allez, que... Voilà. When the foal is born, I think you ask yourself, does this individual correspond to my vision of what that individual might be if the mating works? And so nature corrects you all the time, you know. That whole area is governed by unpredictability, although owners and trainers are vain enough to think that there's logic behind it. But nature has its way, and I've learned through years that you respect it, you know, and you work with it.
Pendant la saison de monte, beaucoup de choses se passent. Et vous voyez ici le matin, il y a une équipe qui s'occupe des saillies, une équipe qui s'occupe du travail vétérinaire de reproduction, une équipe qui fait les soins des jeunes poulains, le vétérinaire qui s'occupe de ça, qui est un autre vétérinaire, vient un petit peu après, mais donc toute la matinée est très occupée. Moi, le message est passé au bureau, qui passe un message à tout le monde, effectivement, qu'on a une naissance. Son Altesse est informée, et voilà.
When Mumtaz Mahal gave birth to her first foal in 1926, a newsreel crew came to film the colt, predicting he might win the Epsom Derby 3 years later. The Flying Filly's firstborn did not win the 1929 Derby. In 1930, though, the Aga Khan III had 2 runners in the race. Rustam Pasha happened to be a son of Kaz, the filly who scored the Aga Khan's first win at Ascot 8 years earlier. His stablemate Blenheim was purchased as a yearling. Rustam Pasha was the public's second favorite to win, and the one the Aga Khan followed in his binoculars. All seemed lost after Rustam Pasha faded, but Blenheim surged, swooping like a conqueror to give his owner his first Derby victory. Blenheim, bred at Lord Carnarvon's Highclere stud, became a successful and influential stallion.
The Aga Khan bought this horse for 4,100 guineas back then. The horse went on to win the Derby. In his first crop of mares, the Aga Khan sent him Mumtaz Mahal. Mumtaz Begum, in turn, bred Nasrullah. It has produced its own dynasty, which is so relevant in the world of thoroughbred breeding today.
Dynasties of thoroughbreds, families who continue to interact over 100 years. The lightning-fast results had set the tone. The family would leave its mark on the turf in the West, as it had in the East.
Springtime is a moment of optimism. And the stable yard just feels very energized because everyone's waiting to see what's going to happen. The lads who are riding the horses, they'll often say, you know, I think I'm riding a good one this year. But until that horse actually gets to the races, we don't know. But it's the nicest thing when someone says, oh, I think he's quite good, or I think she's quite good. And then that horse wins. They are so happy and proud. And I always feel happy and proud as well because it's nice. And it's not necessarily Group 1 horses, it's any horse that does well.
Printemps, c'est le moment où les 3 ans commencent à vraiment travailler. Et bon, on espère parmi ces 3 ans avoir des chevaux classiques.
That really, for me, is the ambition of the organisation, to breed top-class racehorses that are able to perform at Group 1 level in Europe and internationally.
Our responsibility is to produce a crop of foals that have the potential to progress to racing where a percentage of them can achieve at a good level.
Évidemment, il y a toute la gloire des courses et des grandes victoires, mais ces Formule 1 qui gagnent ces courses ont été fabriqués pas simplement dans des grands paddocks verts avec des jolies barrières. Il y a beaucoup de travail qui se fait derrière avec beaucoup de main-d'œuvre. C'est un métier qui nécessite beaucoup de main-d'œuvre, beaucoup de personnel, si on veut une attention à chaque individu, chaque animal. On se repose beaucoup sur le personnel du haras pour dire ce qui ne va pas au moment où un poulain rentre ou au moment où un poulain sort. Enfin, il y a tout un tas de choses comme ça. Voilà un autre lot de chevaux qui rentrent, de juments.
The reason that I hesitated was that I knew the amount of work I had to do for the community and in my role as Imam. I had to take the choice of taking the horse racing institution on and trying to make it a success as it had been always in the past, or taking it on and having the danger of it going down the drain slowly but surely. I don't think that anyone could claim really to be as great a horseman as my father.
I found myself working with men and women who were of my grandfather's age. And then they have a school kid turning up, who hardly knew which end kicked. And that was what they had to deal with. And they were incredibly patient. I mean, it was a whole new, what would I call it, encyclopedia of words, which you don't normally use. So it was a long learning curve.
Pedigrees, leading sires, matriarchs, a new lexicon to acquire under the guidance of the farm managers, Major Cyril Hall, Robert Mueller, and bloodstock advisor, Germaine Vuillet.
They had a very good team around them too, which helped, of course. In fact, I think that was one of the better parts of when my brother took over the stables, is he inherited part of that team, which was a very knowledgeable team, which was a great help, of course. I very often saw my father with horses, of course. Just about every time we were on the stud farm, he would have us come and look at the mares as they walked by with their foals, so we could see them. We just looked and watched. How much we learned was debatable. On the other hand, one heard a lot about horses, even when we were not on stud farms.
The responsibility of preserving the family's thoroughbred tradition was now resting on the shoulders of a young man with so much to learn and such limited free time. The Aga Khan was determined to understand the ins and outs of a racing stable. Alec Head had been the family's main trainer since 1952. He introduced the Aga Khan to mornings on the gallops. Unique moments. Precious time for observation.
What I always found very exciting is if you are moving towards a classic race and you have your last gallop before the race. If that horse actually finishes its gallop and says to you through your binoculars, I can go much faster than this, that is a very exciting feeling.
J'arrivais de province et donc mes souvenirs, d'abord j'ai été très rassuré par le fait que le prince ait tout fait pour me mettre à l'aise. Et puis j'ai été très vite impressionné par ses connaissances de sa jumenterie, de toutes ses familles qu'il connaissait vraiment bien et qu'il avait vraiment travaillé d'année en année pour arriver déjà à ce résultat. Probablement grâce à M. Maté, qui avait été un de ses entraîneurs, il avait vraiment une connaissance qui est très rare chez les propriétaires. Il était capable de voir un galop, capable de connaître, de sentir l'entraînement, ce qui est quand même pas très courant.
I learned a lot from François Maté. I think you need to have a close intellectual relationship with the trainer. You have to speak the same language. And François Maté was a very analytical person, very articulate. He had a quasi-academic attitude towards the activity. If I can be blunt, he didn't like fools. But in the industry, if you like fools, you don't last very long. So I was protected by a very thoughtful man, and I learned a lot from him. We were very lucky to have outstanding jockeys who worked very well with him.
L'image de la Kazakh me revenait avec deux hommes, c'était François Maté et Yves Saint-Martin, et c'était Zedane, et c'était Voilà, des chevaux comme ça qui ont bercé un peu mon enfance. Voilà, il y a beaucoup de chevaux gris d'ailleurs, si je me souviens bien.
Évidemment, Mathé excellait dans son métier et moi j'ai eu la chance de travailler avec lui. Donc c'est lui qui m'a formé, j'étais sa chose, j'étais celui qui terminait le travail qu'il faisait le matin et il cherchait ça depuis très longtemps. On a fait un tandem assez long et redouté.
Calamoon is in full command.
5 years after his sire Zidane, Calamoon scores another victory in the French Guineas for the green and red team.
Valley Game is second, Satingo third, African Sky fourth, Clubhouse next.
Je voyais évidemment avec des yeux admiratifs cet élevage qui était en train de monter en puissance et cet entraîneur classique qui était François Mathé, qui était vraiment un maître en la matière. Et d'ailleurs, quand je suis venu à Chantilly au début, j'ai beaucoup regardé, je me cachais derrière un arbre pour voir ce qu'il faisait.
I remember at times when he'd come in after a gallop and the jockey would say, "This is what happened." And he knew perfectly well that the jockey was telling a story, that the jockey had goofed, he hadn't fulfilled the instructions he had been given. And the French language was significantly expanded on those occasions.
Il avait 300 chevaux, Mathé. 3 lots. 3 lots de 100 chevaux. C'était incroyable, ça.
One chestnut colt particularly captures the attention of a young Jean-Claude Rouget.
Blushing Groom, on est en 75, je suis assistant chez Freddy Palmer à Chantilly. C'est presque du fanatisme, je me souviens très bien, je montais sur un poney, et on croisait le lot de François Mathé, et je n'attendais que Blushing Groom, de le regarder de mon cheval, de le croiser, de voir ce petit cheval alezan, qui était une merveille, c'était vraiment une merveille. Voilà. Donc je me souviens très bien de ces clichés-là, plus que clichés courses.
Champion 2-year-old the previous season, Blushing Groom is aimed at the 1977 Poules d'Essai des Poulains.
Each individual is tested in training, is trained for a particular race. When you go to the races, you just see horses going to the race course, and you think that's it. But in fact, there are years of work, analysis, thought. So it's a fascinating activity.
And overdrive with it. Sudden explosive speed, the hallmark of a champion. Blushing Groom is striding away from them. The crowd already acclaiming an imminent record. The first horse in French racing history to win the top 4 2-year-old prizes and the French 2,000 guineas. Blushing Groom striding away the winner. Barley is going to be second and the rest trailing.
Blushing Groom claims a classic on the mile. Next stop, Epsom, for the testing 12 furlongs of the Derby.
When Blushing Groom ran in the Derby, I think I was 6. And I was too young to go to Epsom with my parents. And my grandmother was here in the house that we used to live in the Bois Saint-Denis. We walked around the house looking for a place where we could connect to a British radio station. My grandmother and I ended up in the attic. And we could just hear a very crackly commentary of the Derby.
Behind Noble Venture towards the outside is Blushing Groom. Just over 3 furlongs to run in the Derby. It's William.
And it was so crackly that we actually missed the last 100 yards. She and I therefore kept listening after the race because we weren't sure whether he had actually won or not. And then he was third, obviously, but that was already a fantastic result. So that was my first live Derby.
The distance had been the question mark for trainer François Mathé before the race. Indeed, the test proved too long for his chestnut speedster, who would be crowned champion 3-year-old miler that year.
His analysis of races was probably the most powerful tool that he had in his industry. And so I was lucky to be exposed to that. The Derby's influenced the breeding world as well as the racing world. It has great tradition, obviously. It's a race which has produced a very, very large number of stallions.
Indeed, The family's first Derby winner, Blenheim, sired the late Aga Khan's third Derby hero, Mahmud, a grandson of Mumtaz Mahal. Less favored than his stablemate Taj Akbar, the grey colt silenced the naysayers. They said a descendant of the Flying Filly would not stay. He smashed the race record in an epic 1936 Derby. With Taj Akbar second, the Aga Khan III achieved a rare feat. Just a year before, Bahram had secured the family's second Derby. The colt, who had previously captured the 2,000 guineas, later conquered the St. Leger and joined an elite band of Triple Crown winners. My Love and Tullyar added the 4th and 5th Derby trophies to the family's rich collection. Tullyar will later sire classic fillies for Prince Ali Khan, Ginetta and Fiorentina, respective winners of the French and Irish Guineas. Epsom, 1981, a colt hailing from the maternal line of Ginetta, trained by Sir Michael Stout and ridden by Walter Swinburne, is about to give the Aga Khan his most memorable thrill on the racecourse.
I think the one race that I would quote to you was Shergar's Derby, where at Tattenham Corner I was in a state of total disbelief. I couldn't believe what my binoculars were telling me. And I thought to myself, am I drunk? And I don't drink. But I saw this horse who was literally cantering. I thought I was wrong, my lenses had gone wrong. Halfway down the finishing straight, you see this horse just moving away from the field. And you're saying to yourself, what am I seeing?
I mean, he wasn't, slightly ahead. He was very greatly ahead, which sort of set off an amazing reaction, family reaction of joy and congratulations.
And so, 51 years after his grandfather led Blenheim into the winner's circle, 29 years after his father accompanied Tullyar back, the Aga Khan and Shergar make their way through the cheering crowd. The family's 6th Derby victory will inspire a young man who never even thought about becoming a jockey growing up.
It was the first time I've ever seen a flat race. It was the first time I ever seen the Epsom Derby. And all I remember was watching this 18-year-old kid riding this super horse with his tongue hanging out and a big white face, and he just going away from the field. 19 years later, I'm riding in the same race for the same owner on a horse that we thought had a chance. It was like clockwork. He carried his head really low. When he got in a battle, he dug really deep. Like all great athletes, he loved being in the fight. And when he did, he never lost.
We were a bit stunned. I'm sure His Highness wasn't, because he had won it before.
You can go out and you can spend millions and millions and millions trying to buy those horses, but to sit down with your team and say, this stallion with this mare could be a Derby horse. There's lots of times it doesn't happen, but you know by the way he leads them into the winner's enclosure. That's the payback for all the work that goes in behind the scenes.
Well, of course, Sindar is the only horse to have won the Epsom Derby, the Irish Derby and the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe. So he's unique. So far that hasn't been repeated. So it takes a good horse, special 3-year-old to be able to go through the year and, keep winning and deliver in the Arc as well. It's tough, it's hard to do. It demands great temperament, durability, soundness, toughness. That's what Sindar was, tough.
Between Shergar and Sindar, the Aga Khan colours shined in another 2 editions of the Turf's Blue Ribbon. Then in 2016 came Harzand.
When we had Harazand being prepared for the Derby and afterwards, His Highness came and enjoyed a visit. He is extremely knowledgeable about all his horses, not just about Harazand or horses that are Group 1 horses, but I'm quite sure every single horse that His Highness has bred, he knows the minute detail about each and every one.
Despite a morning scare, Harzand set off for the Derby.
And they're off.
Naturally, I was nervous, but I had this confidence and belief in both the rider, Pat Smullen, and in my horse that they would not be beaten because they both had the will to win. And that combination proved successful.
They enter the final furlong. Harzand, US Army Ranger, has got to the leader's girth, but has still got to get by as Harzand is pulling out more. And it's Harzand in the colours of the Aga Khan who has won the Investec Derby for Pat Smullen and Dermot Wells.
After Epsom, Harzand went on to win the Irish Derby. He later retired to Giltown Stud. He found himself standing alongside his sire, See the Stars, another Derby hero. By the time the classic season comes to an end, the activity is slowing down in the breeding sheds. Most mares have already been covered, with the hope that the right matings will produce new stars to help write the next chapter.
C'est à l'entraînement qu'on se fait la sélection. Ça progresse et ça change tellement rapidement. C'est fou c'est comme la végétation au printemps. Ces chauds qui fleurissent, qui arrivent, qui s'améliorent, que le terrain s'améliore aussi. Donc on voit le changement d'aptitude, de travail. C'est magnifique, c'est extraordinaire et passionnant, mais c'est vraiment très beau.
Beautiful and memorable. Yves Saint-Martin's ride on Darshan in the 1984 Prix du Jockey Club.
In 1984, I was there and it was the most amazing race. When you think about that finishing order, Darshan, Sadler's Wells, Rainbow Quest. At the time, of course, it was just a wonderful Jockey Club win. But looking back on it, those were three of the most important names in the stud book. So I remember that day very, very well.
C'est un cheval qui a marqué son époque, il n'y a pas de doute. D'avoir la chance d'avoir le meilleur jockey du champ de course avec soi, c'est quand même un avantage énorme. Et en plus, il venait au moins 2 fois par semaine galoper les chevaux avec nous. Tout ça, c'est assez important. En réalité, les courses, elles se gagnent le matin.
Voilà.
Je pense que le fait que Gérald venait souvent le matin, connaissait bien ses chevaux, ça a beaucoup aidé.
Quand vos chevaux sont à l'écoute et qu'ils sont bien préparés, c'est une facilité pour le jockey qui est extraordinaire.
Le cheval comprenait ce qu'on lui demandait, il se connaissait vraiment bien.
Le fait de serrer une natte, ils réagissent. C'est-à-dire qu'ils ont le message. Ils sont à l'écoute.
Alain de Royer-Dupré and Gérald Mossé teamed up to give His Highness the Aga Khan his first 4 victories in the Prix de Diane, a key season objective. The Aga Khan studs bred a record 7 winners of the 3-year-old Phyllis Classic. 6 of them trained by Alain Royer-Dupré, an expert at tailoring to the needs of each individual. Like in 1993 when Shemaka lined up at the start, having skipped her last prep.
Et les voilà partis pour le...
On a attendu vraiment qu'elle soit bien pour courir le Prix de Diane. On a gagné le Prix de Diane en n'ayant couru qu'une fois avant.
Aux abords des poteaux, Baya, Shemaka à la lutte. Sur le poteau, Baya, Shemaka, photo.
On a gagné d'un nez.
On attaque très fort d'entrée.
Et les voilà partis.
Toutes ces arrivées où Gérald Mossé gagnait avec la Casaque du Prince à Chantilly, on avait l'impression que le Prix de Diane, c'était leur course. Donc c'est clair que pour un jeune de 14, 15, 16 ans, Quand il vient sur 4 prix de Diane et il voit le prince Aga Khan gagner 3 fois, on se dit waouh, c'est leur course quoi.
Martial qui a l'avantage au passage du poteau, mais
Dariaba et Vereva, c'était des pouliches qui n'avaient pas couru à 2 ans, qui sont venues très tard, qui avaient une classe folle et qui ont vraiment été préparées en 2 courses pour le prix de Diane. C'était des préparations assez exemplaires.
Des juments qui n'étaient pas forcément des tops de leur génération, mais qui sont arrivés au bon moment. Et puis on a eu des Arcava, des Sierra Fina qui étaient des vraies championnes.
À 150 mètres du but, Zarkava qui va s'envoler vers un triplé historique. Marcel Boussac, Poultes et des Pouliches, prix de Diane. La victoire pour Christophe Soumillon-André Dupré. Gagnon est 2e, Goldikova 3e devant Proviso.
On a eu vraiment même des années où on était premier et second, comme Sierra Fina et Rosanara.
Sarafina qui se détache avec Rosanara qui vient devant Sandbar à l'extérieur. Sarafina qui a pris l'avantage, Rosanara qui vient à son extérieur. Mais c'est Sarafina qui va demeurer invaincu. 3 sorties, 3 victoires.
Et ça prouvait un potentiel d'élevage très très fort au point de vue jumenterie. Et la jumenterie est très très forte parce qu'on a eu des très très bons chevaux avec des étalons qui n'étaient pas forcément des chevaux si reconnus que ça.
Valira qui maintenant est lancé à l'extérieur par Johnny Murta.
In 2012, Valira captured the Prix de Diane a mere 2 months and 3 days after her surprising winning debut.
Qui a été supplémenté et qui prend l'ascendant maintenant sur Beauty Parlor. Valira qui va triompher nettement devant Beauty Parlor.
Jamais justement pensé un moment que cette pouliche-là pouvait gagner une course de groupe, jusqu'au jour où elle a débuté. Et on était déjà, je crois, le 14 avril.
It wasn't until that day that I did realise what the Prix de Diane meant to His Highness. Like huge crowds, big fanfare. It was a big deal.
Any classic race for fillies is important. You're racing with a purpose, particularly with the fillies. What we do in one generation affects the whole of the future of that family. Its commercial value, its breeding value, its aptitude or inaptitude to certain types of races, race courses, etc. That's your future, that's what you breed with.
It's fascinating to watch how they develop. We hope to see a strong, correct, well-balanced, inquisitive individual that catches our eye. Would you go against us, please? So we tend not to interfere with them a lot, and we let them grow as they are in the main. I feel you can get a very good impression of them when they're very young. You still won't know, but you can have your feeling about them that this looks a very nice horse. It looks an athlete.
Selection, reproduction, observation. The cycle continues. Drafting racehorses on paper and hoping the dream will materialize. A fascinating outlet. I'm not an artist, once explained the Aga Khan III. I cannot paint pictures or make beautiful poetry. So I asked myself, how can I do some creative work? I found that in horses. There you choose and try and mate and make an artificial creation.
Nature always teaches you you're wrong. You're playing chess with nature. You move this way, nature takes you that way. And that's part of the fun of the activity, is the unpredictability. But you try to understand it and work with it.
What I find fascinating about my father's passion for horses is that he takes a natural process and applies a very scientific and rigorous analysis to the horse and to the breed and the breeding exercise.
The yearlings will start to come in early July. Just do a small bit of handling with them, and that gives us normally about 7 to 8 weeks before we have our show with His Highness.
It's really when they're yearlings that you start seeing the physical potential of the individuals. When they're foals, you can make judgments, but it's much more difficult because they change enormously between being foals and yearlings. Once they're yearlings, their development is more stable.
For me, it's useful because then when we go into the breeding cycle, I can then think back to the individual that I saw and relate the dam and the yearling, and then that will inform the decision as to who to cover her with the following year.
Breeding and racing for selection means that many Aga Khan graduates are back on the farm to breed at the end of their 3-year-old season, though occasionally an older horse can be spotted training on the farm. Such was the case for Tarnawa, who first returned to Giltown Stud for a spell before a 4-year-old campaign and her Group 1 treble. It was then decided that Tarnawa would race at 5, an extremely rare occurrence for Aga Khan mares. Her semi-holiday included gradual return to work from February to early June, when time came to rejoin Dermot Weld's yard. In Normandy, the yearlings are ready for inspection, and some are eager to grab the attention.
On n'est pas dans une situation où on prépare les chevaux comme s'ils étaient préparés pour aller aux ventes. Ils vivent dehors à cette période de l'année, évidemment, puisqu'on est en été, et qui rentrent le matin, qui sont nourris, qui ressortent l'après-midi. Évidemment, pour les habituer un petit peu à se présenter, pour que nous puissions voir les choses correctement, on leur donne un peu l'habitude de marcher en main, d'avoir un licol avec un chiffonnée pour se présenter correctement, mais c'est une affaire de 3-4 jours. Alors, quand on inspecte les chevaux, on les regarde tous très différemment. On regarde les aplombs, on regarde leur état général, leur allure, s'il y a une ressemblance avec la famille.
Some family female lines are stronger genetically and reproduce themselves all the time. And some stallions are very dominant, so it's useful, the yearling visits are useful in that context as well. I mean, we have all the pictures of all the progeny, but it's not the same as actually seeing the individual who's either, some of them are very flashy, some of them are very dominant, and others are very meek, and it sort of gives you an idea of what that dam is producing.
I'm looking for character, attitude, temperament, movement, and I don't get too hung up on absolutely correct horses. For me, it's all about how they move and how they behave. And that for me, if they move well and behave well, it's a good starting point.
you're asking yourself, is this a racehorse? Then you ask yourself, between the yearling age and the 3-year-old, what is the corrective process that nature might introduce into that family? And so you look at the dams family, you look at the sires family, and you look at what is the corrective process that happens. You can have foals that are back at the knee or that sort of thing. It's amazing how nature corrects itself. Absolutely amazing.
Un cheval, d'abord, c'est un ensemble. Il y a des physiques très différents. On a eu un très très bon cheval sur 1400-1600 mètres qui s'appelait Ashkalani, qui était vraiment un crack, qui suivait tous les trains et qui était capable d'aller plus vite que les autres. Et dès qu'il déboîtait, on savait qu'il avait déjà gagné. On savait qu'il allait venir.
Ashkalani très fort à l'extérieur à la prise. Oh, la lutte avec Kair Almeida qui est côté corde et Tagula qui maintenant résiste assez bien. Mais c'est Ashkalani qui va l'emporter.
C'était un cheval exceptionnel et qui avait un physique très anarchique, qui était un dos très long, était des aplombs très douteux, etc. C'est pour ça que quand on regarde un cheval, on regarde son ensemble, on ne regarde pas les détails, parce que tout cheval a un peu son talon d'Achille, tout cheval a un peu une fragilité quelque part. On a une pouliche comme Shawanda, elle a gagné les Oaks en Irlande, Soumillon s'est retourné à mi-ligne droite, on a gagné le Vermeil, il s'est retourné à mi-ligne droite. Elle avait besoin d'appui, compte tenu de ses jarrets, elle avait besoin d'un appui très ferme, et c'est un grand regret de ma vie, parce qu'elle était somptueuse avant l'arc, il s'est mis à pleuvoir la veille et tout était mort.
If Shawanda's dam descends from old Aga Khan stock, her sire Sindar came from mixing the family's bloodlines with those of Marcel Boussacs.
On peut remarquer que, de manière habituelle, on n'achète pas de juments sur le marché individuellement. Et les choses ont été faites différemment, jusqu'à maintenant en tout cas, d'acheter un élevage entier. Et c'est une des particularités de l'élevage de Son Altesse. C'est une manière de renouveler un petit peu le cheptel de juments.
Il a été amené à acquérir plus de 400 chevaux de 3 élevages, 77, le premier qui a été l'élevage Dupré, dans lequel il y avait l'Yearling Topville, 78 qui a été l'élevage Boussac, qui avait comme dans le lot, il y avait Akamas qui venait de gagner le prix du Jockey Club.
Sindar came from that purchase, as did Darshan, Izana and Ebazia and all the E family that have done so well over the last number of years.
Et puis en 2005, le dernier achat de Lagardère, il y avait l'Inamix et il y avait beaucoup d'acquisitions qui avaient été faites outre-Atlantique.
Royal Ascot, June 2005. Valixir, in his new green and red colors, conquers the Queen Anne Stakes. He had been the flag bearer for the Lagardère stables the previous year and was one of 222 thoroughbreds to join the Aga Khan bloodstock.
Il a fallu intégrer les haras, le personnel, les juments, et donc l'entreprise Aga Khan en France a doublé de taille.
C'est l'Inamix sur l'Inamix sur l'Inamix sur l'Inamix sur mix, et ainsi de suite. Il a cassé toutes les règles de l'élevage et il a eu un succès fabuleux. Chapeau, mon vieux.
Il y a eu beaucoup de bons chevaux qui sont venus de cet élevage. On a élevé Siuni, qui est devenu aujourd'hui un étalon de référence.
Over the years, new farmlands and infrastructures were developed, building upon historical purchases. Arad Bonneval now stands next to Arad de Saint-Crépin, which has been in the family since the 1920s. Giltown Stud is close to Sheshun Stud, another one of the original purchases. The grounds have been nurtured and improved throughout generations, just as their inhabitants have.
He's fantastic at imparting his knowledge, and he really formed us.
He always starts with the question, what are we looking for this mare?
Obviously, you look for positive and negative traits when you do your breeding. If you have a family that has bad knees, you try to breed away from that. If there are families that don't accelerate, you try to breed to introduce acceleration.
He taught me to take a very Cartesian approach to the decisions that are taken and how they're taken.
So he would literally go down the pedigree and say, that mare was like that, this mare was like this one had a wind problem, that one was crazy, this stallion. And we would write these notes. Zara and I had pages and pages of notes to try and remember all of this.
Also, he's taught me that sometimes it's worth just taking a chance. That sometimes you might do something completely unusual, unexpected. Sometimes you're going to want an outcross paper because maybe the family's getting a bit dead, so try anything. Or sometimes you're going to pick inbreedings that you normally wouldn't just because it could be the right stallion for that mare.
When presented to Doyoun, Daltawa gave classic winner Delamy. When sent to Darshan, she produced another champion, Dalakani.
And he was hilarious because he was very much like a concierge. It just made me laugh. Whenever there was a pin drop, the head would be out looking what's going on, surveying.
Something clicked from the get-go between the curious colt and Christophe Soumillon.
J'ai jamais monté un cheval comme ça. C'est incroyable, entre la souplesse, le mental, sa façon de regarder tout ce qui se passait autour de lui. J'avais l'impression d'être sur Pégase, quoi. À partir de ce moment-là, je sais que j'ai un crack, je sais que j'ai le cheval pour gagner le Jockey Club l'année prochaine. Donc avec Alain, on a tout fait pour peaufiner ça au fur et à mesure.
Christophe était jeune, il était très près du cheval, il aimait beaucoup son cheval et je pense que ça a aidé beaucoup à ce que le cheval fasse une carrière, une belle carrière.
Et ils sont partis pour le prix du Jockey Club 2003.
Il était incroyable parce qu'il était capable en pleine accélération de pointer les oreilles, de respirer. Donc je sentais mes pieds et mes sangles se gonfler et il repartait. On s'est dit ça y est quoi, pépite. Et malheureusement, voilà, manque de vigilance, manque d'expérience, excès de confiance en le cheval et en d'autres choses, peut-être en moi aussi, on est battu en Irlande.
Settling third on the inside is Dalakani, the favourite. A length further back in the field, then on the outside, a Lamb Shah, followed by Powers Court.
I must say, I'll always be grateful to His Highness for allowing us to run Alamshire, and he said, no, Alamshire has to run, that's John Ox's local derby, he's trained on the Curragh, if he wants to run the horse, we'll run him.
Here's a Lamb Shah on the outside with a brown cap, they've kicked away now from Roosevelt.
When we turned into the straight, I attacked them pretty early and we got into a battle.
They're neck and neck with 150 yards left to go. A Lamb Shah on the near side for Johnny Murtagh. Edges into the front now. Another Lamb Shah wins the Irish Derby by a neck.
Oh, Christophe, he had the Arc in his mind. The Arc was the biggest race for him, whereas the Irish Derby was the biggest race for me. There was only a neck, it could have went either way, and there were two fantastic horses.
Alamshire, c'était aussi le cheval du Prince qu'il avait élevé, qui ensuite derrière, quelques semaines après, a gagné quand même les King George, donc on n'était pas battu par n'importe qui. Et ça m'avait vraiment touché parce que voilà, je voulais vraiment faire un sans faute avec lui.
With the arc approaching, Dalakani showed every sign he was ready, boosting his jockey's confidence.
J'ai lâché cette phrase, ne vous inquiétez pas, je vais aller la chercher, je vais gagner le premier arc d'Alain. Et le Prince, quand je l'ai regardé du coin de l'œil, il m'a sorti un grand sourire. Et pareil, il m'a fait du style, vas-y, montre-nous. Quand ils ont ce changement de vitesse en quelques foulées, et qui mettent entre 15 et 18 chevaux dans le vent en quelques accélérations. Là, on se dit, mais c'est l'extase, quoi.
Et Dalakani qui font sur lui avec Doria qui est un petit peu plus loin. Muptaker, Dalakani avec Dalakani maintenant qui vient de dépasser Muptaker à 250 mètres du but. Dalakani, Muptaker qui lui résiste bien. Aïcha Baral est pour l'instant en troisième position avec Dalakani qui a toujours le meilleur devant Muptaker. Dalakani, Muptaker, c'est Dalakani qui va s'imposer dans ce prix de l'Arc de Triomphe. Dalakani devant Muptaker. La troisième place pour Aïcha Baral.
Le déclenchement d'adrénaline pour nous à cheval, il est extraordinaire. Mais quand un propriétaire voit son cheval passer le poteau et qu'il entend toute cette foule hurler, c'est des moments hors du commun. Bien sûr, je pense au Prince, je pense à Zara et surtout à Alain.
Christophe était très jeune et c'était vraiment le cheval avec lequel il a commencé à rentrer dans la cour des grands.
Et je rentre avec cet animal fabuleux qui profite autant que moi, qui observe tout, qui a peur de rien, ni des flashs, ni de la couverture.
And he was such a poetic, beautiful horse. He was from the first foal crop that we had actually been part of the mating decisions with, obviously with His Highness overseeing them. We felt that His Highness had given us this huge task and we didn't know if we were really up to the job. But Dalakani made us feel reassured that we hadn't ruined everything.
Entraîner pour un éleveur, c'est vraiment la plus grande satisfaction. Parce qu'il y a un respect du cheval, il y a un respect des familles, il y a un respect de la mise en valeur qui est vraiment important.
Quand on entraîne ces chevaux-là, il y a quelque chose. On le sent, il y en a qui vont pas tous être bons, ils vont avoir des problèmes, mais on sent qu'il y a quelque chose et on sent que si ça sort pas là, ça va arriver à un moment ou à un autre.
They keep throwing up generation after generation. They're throwing up good horses and champions, and that's so important. And it's recognized everywhere.
La base, c'est quand même de faire en fonction du cheval. Des casaques comme celle du Prince permettent justement d'attendre les chevaux, de respecter les chevaux et d'en tirer le meilleur le jour venu.
We're very conscious of the fact that we're seeing them in a snapshot in time, and horses of that age develop and change so much.
Ce qui est important, c'est la réalité de l'individu. Chacun donne son avis, et à partir de là, un commentaire est fait, une note est donnée, et puis on passe au suivant.
Maybe on occasion, if we're looking at an individual that we're not particularly keen on, we might say, well, that's your fault. Because unfortunately, we have kept very, very detailed notes on who wanted what, and I think those notes should be locked away in a vault someplace, because never to be seen by anybody.
On peut voir quelques champions que nous avons qui n'étaient pas forcément des chevaux qui avaient une inspection très bonne. Mais après, il y a ce qu'il y a à l'intérieur, il y a le cœur, il y a la capacité respiratoire, il y a l'entraînement, il y a tout un tas d'aptitudes qui font que le cheval va performer ou non.
It's a snapshot in time, but it's very informative, and it's not just for the yearlings. I think it's a time when we can regroup as a team and make some interesting decisions for the organisation.
His Highness the Aga Khan added a series of leading owner awards to the collection started by his grandfather. The attention to dosage in the early days, the renewal and revival of bloodlines in the following decades contributed to the success and the aura of the Aga Khan studs.
I'm a very big fan of the concept of the blue hen. For me, it describes all those mares in the history of the thoroughbred who've bred 4 or more Group 1 winners. There are only 9, and to think that the Aga Khan was responsible for 2 of those really is quite phenomenal.
One of the 2 mares is Darshan's sister by Tubville, the Group 1 winner, Dorara. The other is a daughter of Darshan, Ebazia. The 4 Group 1 winners she produced succeeded over an impressive range of distances, from 7 to 20 furlongs, including the classic course of the Irish Oaks.
Every year we seem to have a top-class horse from this family, and we had Estimate that was given to the Queen. It's just a very versatile, consistent, sound family.
The Queen had explained on a number of occasions that it was a race that she really coveted winning.
From one horse lover to another, a very special present was designed on the occasion of Her Majesty's 80th birthday.
He had an idea that it would be wonderful to allow the Queen access to all of his important bloodlines. So he then offered the Queen to use some of these mares from these lines, a number of them, until some daughters were found.
Estimate was part of that agreement, so she was actually bred in Ireland, raised at Shoshone and Giltown, and then when she was a yearling, she was sent into training with Sir Michael Stout.
And lo and behold, it was an extraordinary outcome to have produced Estimate so early on in the plan, and there have been a number of black type class horse females that have come from the plan.
Princess Zara has shared her father's passion from an early age. She also received a special birthday gift, one which opened a brand new chapter in the family tradition.
When my father offered for me to pick 2 fillies out of the strings, he said, you also had better get some colours too. And so I thought about it for a while, and I thought, what am I going to do? Am I going to go completely non-traditional, or shall I follow tradition? And in the end, I followed tradition, and I picked my father and grandfather's pattern, that is their epaulettes, and my great-grandfather's colours. So I kind of married 3 generations of colours into one set of silks.
Et je me souviens, la princesse m'a dit, mais il faut surtout, je veux pas prendre un très bon cheval de mon père. On a raisonné en se disant, on va plutôt prendre des chevaux qui ont une valeur génétique. Et donc on a eu Daral Beda, qui a gagné sa première course et qui après a été placé dans un groupe 3 sur 2400 mètres.
In order to bring a bit of speed into the next generation, we sent her to Zilzal. She had Darinska, and we sent Darinska to Zamindar again for speed and precocity, and it worked.
Et on a eu Dargina, qui est une jument qui a gagné la poule d'essai des pouliches, qui était magnifique.
À 50 mètres du poteau, c'est Fischel-Méo attaqué par Dargina qui vient l'attaquer. Fischel-Méo, Dargina, Fischel-Méo, photographie, peut-être Dargina au poteau.
So you can go from a 1.5 mile mare to a miler in 2 generations.
J'ai eu la chance de monter pour elle Dargina et Mandesha, où on est tombé sur 2 pouliches qui pendant 2 saisons ont fait un peu de l'ombre à la Kazakh paternelle.
La victoire très facilement pour le 5 Mandesha qui survole l'épreuve devant Montaré.
Je me souviens d'une phrase du prince me disant, je pense que Zara, avec ses 2 juments, a une meilleure réussite que moi avec toute mon écurie.
Mandesha qui va s'imposer dans un 3e groupe 1 consécutif.
C'est fabuleux, quoi. Elle avait ces 2 juments qui gagnaient groupe 1 sur groupe 1 et qui étaient formidables.
I was absolutely thrilled. Absolutely thrilled. I've always felt that for my children, in the work that they do, they really have to stand on their own feet as early as possible.
As the leaves start to fall, the windlings are settling into their new environment. The yearlings are entering a new phase and learning a brand new trade. For horses in training, much has happened since the spring, each individual evolving to the best of its abilities. Early classics help define a clear picture of the cream of the crop. Autumn is a season for championships and a chance for some to show just how truly exceptional they are.
The really exceptional individual leaves you memories which are fantastic.
À 250 mètres du but, c'est là Friends Goal qui essaie de gagner de bout en bout. Mais Mado Battu vient à l'extérieur avec de plus en plus fort à l'extérieur. Le numéro 2 Zarkava. Zarkava et Christophe Soumillon qui viennent fondre sur Conference Goal. Le numéro 2 Zarkava qui vient pulvériser l'opposition dans la phase finale. Le 2 Zarkava qui s'impose, deuxième place pour la Conference Goal.
Le Marcel Boussac, elle saute, il y a une ombre près du poteau et elle l'a sauté. Pour qu'un cheval saute quand il est en fin de parcours, c'est qu'il est vraiment pas fatigué.
When you get down to the paddock afterwards and the jockey is lost for words, the trainer is lost for words, the owner is lost for words, the lad is beaming, you see something has happened that is exceptional and you recognize it straight away. But then that turns into, obviously, fear. Because you don't know what's going to happen afterwards.
Et c'est Zarkava, le numéro 4, invaincu, 4 courses, 4 victoires, qui remporte cette poule d'essai des pouliches, arrêté par Christophe Soumillon. Zarkava, invaincu, qui gagne ce groupe 1 devant le 13 Goldikova.
Zarkava qui va s'envoler vers un triplé historique. Marcel Boussac, poule d'essai des pouliches, prix de Diane, la victoire pour Christophe Soumillon, l'André Dupré.
D'où ça vient? Elle n'a pas une arrière-main surdimensionnée, elle a pas... Oui, elle a un beau passage de sang, mais elle est quand même petite. Elle a une toute petite tête, elle a une petite bride. Même moi, dessus, quand je pousse fort, j'ai l'impression de lui toucher les oreilles. En fait, elle a rien de ce dont rêve un entraîneur, un jockey ou un éleveur quand il voit un cheval, un produit arriver, par exemple au hara ou même au ventre, quoi.
I looked at her notes quite a few times to say, okay, what did you not see there?
Zarkava's dam Zarkasha was unraced, but had shown promise in training.
I'll always remember speaking to John Ox, and she sustained an injury in training which ended her career without racing. But he did say to me one day that he managed to do one piece of work with her where she showed a level of ability that impressed him. And that is probably the greatest piece of information we ever got.
If there were a perfect horse from our breeding operation, it would have to be Zarkava, because she could race over many distances, and she raced over all distances. She was absolutely a genius. I mean, she had a fantastic turn of foot. She is a little bit bonkers, but that helps also sometimes. I would see her as the perfect outcome from this breeding operation.
Zarkava est le mieux que j'ai eu la chance d'entraîner. Vous avez un tel bijou qu'il ne faut pas l'abîmer, c'est tout. Le reste, c'est simple.
She hadn't run for 3 months. Alain had given a steely-eyed stare to Christophe in the paddock beforehand and said, "You are not allowed to ask her to quicken until the 400-metre mark, because this is a comeback race. I do not want her to have a hard race before the arc."
Et nous retenons notre souffle, peut-être une nouvelle envolée de Zarkava, on l'espère.
Là, la boîte s'ouvre et elle sort pas. Et là, pendant 20 centièmes de seconde, j'ai dit, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Je sens qu'elle est ronchon, quoi. Elle est pas motivée. Je dis, bon, bah tant pis.
Alors que la grande favorite Zarkava est encore dernière.
Avec Adord qui a l'avantage, encore une dizaine de longueurs, alors qu'il reste encore environ 300 mètres à parcourir. On tente de revenir maintenant, notamment avec Daremi. Et voilà maintenant complètement à l'extérieur, Zarkava qui a été déboîté et lancé par Christophe Soumillon. Zarkava qui allonge maintenant ses foulées et qui termine en poulet de canon complètement à l'extérieur. Formidable Zarkava. Zarkava qui va déposer l'opposition. Zarkava qui fait quelque chose d'exceptionnel aujourd'hui.
J'ai jamais commenté aussi vite, si je puis dire cela comme ça. Elle est encore en dernière position au pavillon. Seule une jument qui sortait de l'ordinaire comme elle pouvait revenir sur une jument qui était exceptionnelle aussi. Il faut se rappeler que la deuxième s'appelle Daremi. C'est une jument qui avait remporté plusieurs groupes 1 également. Et elle l'a traversée comme si c'était simplement une pouliche de réclamée.
En descendant des tribunes, j'ai rencontré des gens qui avaient conscience d'avoir vu quelque chose de vraiment étonnant et qu'on ne reverrait pas souvent.
I think that race summed up her complete dominance and her complete brilliance.
Quand on approche les grandes échéances avec une jument comme Zarkava, on a surtout peur qu'elle se fasse mal. On était sans arrêt, dès qu'elle sortait d'un box, on était là à regarder pour être sûr qu'il n'y ait pas la moindre chose, quoi.
Vous l'emmeniez le matin pour aller à la balance ou à la douche, elle sortait comme une grande. Et vous la prépariez pour la balade du soir, elle sortait, mais elle faisait un bond comme une gazelle, et on avait toujours peur qu'en faisant ce bond, qu'elle se cogne dans sa porte, qu'elle glisse à l'arrivée. Donc on a été lui acheter une moquette dans le barn. On a essayé de l'habiller comme pour aller aux courses le soir, mais non, c'était son heure où elle avait pris cette petite habitude.
And then, the week before the Arc, she started walking out normally. And then Pierre started saying, "What's happened? Something's wrong with her."
On the day of the race, the team has no doubt in the filly's abilities. She's ready. But what would she think of next?
J'avais peur qu'elle nous fasse une blague.
Heureusement, j'ai le collier dans la main gauche, très serré avec un morceau de natte. Et là, je pars. Et heureusement, elle fait un petit écart à gauche, elle revient, elle me remet en selle.
The rest is history.
On tente de venir avec It's Genio, Soldier of Fortune également, Duke of Marmalade qui refait du terrain avec Vision Star et Zarkava également qui tente de se rapprocher, c'est la casaque verte qui n'a pas encore le passage. It's Genio est à la corde et qui tente de repartir maintenant, Soldier of Fortune qui vient à son extérieur, mais voilà maintenant Zarkava qui lancé en pleine piste par Christophe Soumillon. Zarkava, vous aviez rendez-vous avec l'histoire, Zarkava, ce rendez-vous, vous ne l'avez pas manqué, formidable Zarkava qui va s'imposer dans un arc de triomphe exceptionnel. Zarkava s'impose, Christophe Soumillon.
C'est le bijou, c'est le joyau du prince. C'est la meilleure jument de course qu'il ait élevée et vue dans sa vie.
These are horses who dominate several generations. They race against older horses, they race against colts and fillies, they race over different courses, different going.
49 years after Petite Étoile's stellar 3-year-old season, Zarkava shines on.
And that, to me, is such a cycle of longevity. To see, after so many generations, to see that bloodline come back again.
La partie du débourrage est importante, effectivement, puisque nous enseignons à ce moment-là la future profession du cheval. Donc, ils sont des animaux, ce ne sont pas des animaux avec la même intelligence que l'homme, en tout cas. Je ne sais pas si c'est mieux ou moins bien, et donc il faut leur apprendre un certain nombre de choses.
Allez, c'est parti. Très bien. Encore.
C'est une équipe qui est formée pour cela, avec des cavaliers, de préférence assez légers, puisque les chevaux sont très jeunes, hein, ils ont 1 an et demi à peu près quand on les débourre. Donc c'est encore très jeune, la croissance n'est pas terminée. Donc il y a la situation de continuité de croissance qui est à respecter, en leur demandant de faire de l'exercice et en leur demandant mentalement d'accepter ce travail de les dresser en quelque sorte. Je pense qu'on a un assez bon mix de ce que j'appellerais la méthode très traditionnelle européenne, avec un bon apport de la méthode américaine, peut-être de Monty Roberts ou d'autres, de cette école-là en tout cas, qui permet d'avoir un rapport avec l'animal beaucoup plus doux, beaucoup plus naturel, beaucoup plus intuitif, plutôt que de le forcer. Donc avec ce mélange de méthodes, avec des gens intelligents, des bons hommes de chevaux, des cavaliers, qui comprennent la situation, je pense qu'on arrive à faire les choses pas trop mal. Et c'est passionnant comme période en réalité.
When we start our breaking, it initially begins in Shishun, in Turf Lodge, where they have their tack put on for the first time and they lunge and drive in long reins. And then they move to the training yards in Giltown where they'll be ridden. And Carl and his riders, I find them to be very, very clued in. They know what they like, but they know what they don't like. So when they sit on a horse for the first time, I'll get a nod or I'll get a shake of the head. I suppose it's a first real important piece of information when they sit on them and feel the movement. So once we have agreed on the distribution of the yearlings, what yearlings will go to which trainers, we start with the bigger, the stronger, the more mature yearlings. And it's not long before I'll get a call from one or more of the trainers saying, any yearlings coming? So we normally have the first ones leaving us here in about early to mid-October. If I can, I'd like to have most of them gone pre-Christmas and get them settled into their new environment.
Only the future will tell which of these apprentice racehorses will follow in the footsteps of champions. One thing is certain. The thrill of the quest never fades. The commitment of His Highness and Princess Zara has never wavered.
C'est une passion et tout leur système, tout leur talent, toutes leurs compétences, toute leur force, toute leur puissance a été mise au service de cette passion. Et donc, évidemment, il y a beaucoup de travail fait autour des courses, autour de l'élevage. Leur contribution dans la vie de l'institution est vraiment déterminante.
Toutes les réunions que j'ai pu avoir dans ma carrière avec le prince Aga Khan m'ont impressionné. Le personnage avait une connaissance absolue de tout, était vraiment très méticuleux, regardait tous les détails.
C'est vraiment un homme de vision et un homme qui s'inscrit dans le temps long, donc quelqu'un qui se donne les moyens d'accomplir cette vision.
In 1988, the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe found itself in want of a sponsor. The Aga Khan saw an opportunity not only to promote his chain of Chiga hotels, but also to turn a one-day event into a world-class weekend to attract contenders and racegoers from around the globe. The Aga Khan successfully pleaded with French racing officials to reorganize the program to showcase the season's best group races in one weekend.
Et essayer de suggérer sans imposer, de façon à pouvoir développer tout ce qu'on faisait en partenariat. Donc pour moi, ça a été un grand partenaire de l'institution des courses.
The Chiga logo no longer appears on ARC programs, but the vision still stands. It inspired other racing venues to adopt a similar format. In Ireland, for example, where the renovated Curragh is home to the second day of the Irish Champions Weekend.
He's the driving force behind the fact that we have a new modern Curragh racecourse.
And when a privately owned hotel stood in the way of redesigning a functional racecourse, the Aga Khan took action.
Unbeknownst to them, His Highness then went into negotiations with that hotel, bought that hotel, gifted it to the Curragh Racecourse, and then said, right, now you have no excuse, you really do need to redevelop this racecourse.
He came back with his
his ambition, with his drive, with his inspiration. He got the industry on board, he made it happen.
And this wasn't all just in boardrooms. You'd find him at various times roaming around. I remember one of the head of the military across in the Curragh camp saying that he was nearly arrested one day because he was in inspecting the buildings there because of the beauty and the historical significance of the buildings, not realizing he was in a restricted zone.
Il n'est pas que un grand monsieur et un président, c'est un bâtisseur et il a des idées.
Mathieu Vincent and Will Manet witnessed how determined His Highness was to save and improve Chantilly Racecourse.
Il n'imaginait pas qu'on puisse fermer Chantilly, sachant que l'hippodrome sert également pour l'entraînement. Et donc on a commencé à travailler sur un projet, il s'est impliqué, il a financé une étude sur l'ensemble de la région pour voir l'image qu'avait Chantilly, pour voir ce qu'on pouvait développer.
Et de temps en temps, j'avais le secrétariat du prince qui m'appelait en matinée, qui me disait le prince aimerait bien passer en fin de journée vers 19h30 ou 20h faire le tour du chantier. Donc on faisait le tour du chantier avec le prince. Et là, je peux vous dire qu'il fallait être bien concentré, il fallait bien tout noter, parce il voyait tous les petits détails, il avait toujours beaucoup d'idées.
Ideas not limited to the racecourse, but extending to Chantilly's cultural heritage as well, with a significant and innovative plan to preserve and promote its museum collections.
Il faut savoir que c'est le plus grand partenariat public-privé en France dans le domaine culturel. Donc avec un don exceptionnel de 70 millions d'euros sur 15 ans. Et donc l'Institut de France est très reconnaissant de l'œuvre du prince Aga Khan pendant ces 15 années. Il faut savoir qu'il y a eu des restaurations majeures au sein du domaine. Et c'est grâce à l'Aga Khan que le domaine est vraiment porté à son apogée et à son rayonnement qu'il connaît aujourd'hui.
Le musée du cheval a été rénové en 2013 grâce au soutien de son Altesse l'Aga Khan. Et c'est vrai qu'il a donné une valeur artistique et ethnographique, puisque le musée, à travers différentes thématiques, présente vraiment l'histoire du cheval dans toutes les civilisations. Et sa donation a une grande place dans la collection aujourd'hui, dans toutes les œuvres qui sont exposées.
Déjà, quand arrive le week-end de l'Arc, c'est vraiment un week-end important sur le plan international. Et donc, on a vraiment un désir fou, c'est pour l'élevage, pour ce grand élevage, que ça marche.
It's a very intense 2 days of racing, and I suppose it can shape your year.
2009 is a year the team will never forget. The Aga Khan studs won 7 group races, including 5 Group 1s over the 2 days.
400 mètres à parcourir.
Avec Goldikova qui semble avoir la situation en main, qui accélère, mais
Varenard claimed the first Group 1, defeating Goldikova in the Prix de la Forêt with Stéphane Pasquier in the stirrups. One of 4 jockeys booked at the last minute after the Aga Khan's retained rider Christophe Lemaire had been sidelined by a fall on the previous day. Gérald Mousset rode Manigar to victory in the Prix Chaudenay, and Daria Kana in the Prix de Royaulieu.
There was one victory that was wonderful, there's another victory that was wonderful, and then it just kept happening.
Après déjà la première journée, on se dit déjà on va déjà avoir fait un bon moment.
We went out to celebrate because we thought we've had a fantastic weekend. We could not believe that we won 4 Group 1s the following day.
C'est Rosarana et Christophe Soumillon qui vont s'imposer.
Après Zarkava, Rosanara passe directement d'un Médène à un groupe 1 à ce total prix Marcel Boussac.
Siouni qui a pris le meilleur avec en deuxième position Pals Lopé de Vega. Siouni qui va s'imposer. Encore Alain Noyer-Dupré.
C'est déjà un 3e groupe 1 pour Alain Noyer-Dupré.
We were in and out of the lifts, and we were kind of looking at each other thinking, God, this is good, isn't it?
I remember Mikhail coming into the paddock for the Prix de l'Opéra. He was white as a sheet because he felt that he should not be running his filly in the Prix de l'Opéra. He was like, I am going to break this run.
Je me disais, qu'est-ce que je viens faire là-dedans, moi, ma petite Chalanaya qui venait de gagner une listed.
Je me souviens très bien que le prince avait été très réconfortant pour moi avant la course. Vous voyez, je pense que j'étais un petit peu stressé. Et puis finalement, la course s'est très bien déroulée et elle a gagné de toute une classe.
Shalalaya s'impose, Maxime Guyot, Nita est peut-être deuxième, à voir avec le numéro 8.
That ARC weekend was surreal. And by the time the last race was won, I didn't know what to say. I don't think my father knew what to say either.
I think we were almost getting a little bit embarrassed at the end of it. I mean, 5 Group 1s over 2 days and 2 Group 2s. It was extraordinary.
The Arc was the only group race missed that weekend. However, the winner Sea the Stars later joined the Aga Khan Stud Stallion roster. The 2009 Arc weekend also revealed Siyouni as a precocious 2-year-old. The son of Pivotal became a leading sire at Arad Bonneval.
L'arrivée de Siyouni a été l'ouverture d'une... Même si nous avions des étalons par le passé, nous avions eu Kayazi, Sindar, Sendawar. Là, on a vraiment été mis sur la carte avec Siyouni. Et on a tout de suite remarqué que sa production était bonne, qu'il était améliorateur de juments relativement modestes au départ. On a eu affaire à beaucoup de, entre guillemets, petits éleveurs au départ qui ont fabriqué ce cheval. Et puis ça réveille l'étalonnage à Aga Khan. Et donc ça nous permet aussi par la suite de rentrer avec un peu plus de confiance, des étalons comme Darian, et puis Zarak évidemment, un fils de Dubaoui et de Zarkava, que nous avons aussi rentré sous une forme similaire de syndication et qui est extrêmement populaire.
From my experience, every 7, 8, 9 years, you'll have an individual, very often a male, that you can then have become a stallion, that's going to assist you to achieve equilibrium. So the goal is, frankly, to produce stallions and to be able to stand stallions in your own stud.
Shergar had revealed himself as one such exceptional individual. He won hearts across the world, especially in Kildare, where he retired to stud with a welcome parade. Shergar's full potential as a sire will never be known. He was abducted and never seen again. A terrible loss for the Aga Khan and a nation of horse lovers.
It was troubled times in Ireland, and I remember thinking, oh, perhaps His Highness and his family will leave Ireland now, and they would have been justified.
I think to his credit, he didn't flinch.
Not only did he not leave, he redoubled his commitment to this country.
At the end of every year, the Aga Khan studs sell a selection of the stock, an important part of maintaining the equilibrium of the operation.
The costs are going up, and they're always going to go up. We're not able to control that. So I don't want this to be an inherited drain. I'm not going to leave my children that.
To be honest, when the Aga Khan draft arrives in here, there are literally queues of people waiting to see them, because this is an opportunity to buy into the best bloodlines in the world. His Highness is the shareholder of note here at Goffs. He holds a 44% stake in the company. He's been a shareholder here for over 50 years. He wanted to provide Ireland with a sales company of international standards and global appeal. His Highness believes that breeders should be able to sell their horses in Ireland. I believe that his reason for investing in Goffs and obviously in Arkana is for that reason.
And I have invested in them as business enterprises. The fact that I invested in them has encouraged other people to do the same thing. So in that sense, Arkana, for example, has been a successful story.
En 2006, quand l'opportunité de réunir les deux sociétés de vente françaises, en l'occurrence l'Agence française et Goff France, est apparue, le prince nous a immédiatement fait part de son soutien. L'objectif était, en impliquant les éleveurs et en faisant valoir cette synergie, de renforcer les ventes françaises dans le concert international.
Rien ne lui plaisait autant que de découvrir les plans quand on était en train de travailler à la rénovation de l'établissement de vente et particulièrement de la salle de vente, à rentrer dans les détails, à donner son point de vue sur les choix architecturaux qui pouvaient être faits. Je suis personnellement convaincu que l'agence Arcana, ce qu'elle est devenue, ne serait probablement jamais advenue si le prince Aga Khan n'avait pas été au cœur de ce dispositif.
Et Béra est toujours là, n'est-ce pas?
Oui, elle est là, elle est dans le box, celle qui a la tête dehors là. Mais on ne veut pas trop l'embêter parce qu'elle a peur qu'elle... Non, mais elle est extra. Il y en a un qui a bien débuté aujourd'hui, un Zarek. Ouais, troisième.
Némoni m'a envoyé la liste, il est tête de liste pour protection de 2 ans. C'est top.
Ah ouais, c'est bien parti. Hein. Puis ils ont tous l'air d'accélérer surtout.
Ouais.
Elle tourne bien. Hein.
Ouais.
Voilà, elle commence à évoluer un petit peu. Elle est bien dans le. Elle est bien dans le style. De...
Il est little one. Elle est sage?
Elle est dynamique.
Dynamique.
Ça, cette famille-là, ils ont du sang. Hein.
Ouais.
Et une belle épaule. Hein.
Ouais.
Et celle très en arrière.
Ouais.
C'est quand même important, je trouve, que la mère qui était surnaturelle produise quand même des chevaux de niveau groupe, quoi. Parce que c'est très souvent les vraies championnes,
non,
elles produisent pas forcément.
Sont...
Très peu de grandes championnes qui ont sorti 3 chevaux de niveau groupe 1.
Non,
oui.
non, il
n'y
a
pas
donné à tout le monde. Hein.
Urban Sea, à part ça.
Oui.
Miesque.
Non, elle est propre. Hein.
Elle est propre. Rien à dire.
Et elle va pas être si petite que ça. Des jambes noires.
Oui, c'est bon pour les tissus, ça.
Oui, tout à fait.
Jolie tête.
Ah ouais. Elle a un œil magnifique.
Oui.
Envie de faire une peinture. Hein.
Merci.
C'est sympa.
Merci.
Do not do anything half-heartedly. Do it intensely. Do it with all your power and strength. Do not allow the subconscious to influence you under the guise of, while this is after all our distraction, this is not our job. This is only a pastime. Every sportsman will find that by such intensive concentration, he can improve whatever he's doing in that line enormously.
This activity has been in the family for 4 generations, and my hope is that it will continue.
Going forwards, I see my role as a caretaker. I love this activity. I admit it's my night and weekend job, but I love it. My father loves it. I have 2 nephews as well. And so, of course, we hope that someone's going to fall in love with horses. Both my children would really get involved, but I'm afraid I've told them they can only do that when they've finished university.
As the end of another season draws near, yearlings are gradually joining the training yards. Another cycle will soon take place. A new generation will be born. New hopes will rise. New matings will be designed. New champions will be crowned. While other, more discreet individuals will keep playing their part, carrying in their genes a century-old tradition. Who knows from which line the next gem will come?
Valérie numéro 1 qui s'en va maintenant. Valérie qui compte 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 en avance. Valérie qui va s'imposer extrêmement facilement. Christophe Soumillon, Jean-Claude Rouget pour le Prince Aga Khan.